It was in the days leading up to Thanksgiving. I stood in my kitchen, a long wooden spoon in hand, gently stirring a pot of slow-braised beef brisket that was simmering contentedly on the stove. The rich, savory aroma of the beef mingling with herbs and red wine filled the vast, cold space. I had given our housekeeper the pros. Morning off to go home early for the holiday. This enormous house was now occupied by just me and the low hum of the exhaust fan. It was the same every subalet year. No matter how many staff we had, I held on to the tradition of preparing the Thanksgiving feast myself. I had always believed that the warmth of a kitchen was the only thing that could truly hold a man's heart. But perhaps that belief was misplaced, or maybe the fire in my hearth was never warm enough to thaw the coldness in his. The ringing of my phone shattered the silence. The screen lit up with the name my dearest husband, accompanied by our wedding photo from years ago, our faces radiant with laughter. I quickly wiped my hands on my apron, took a deep breath to compose my voice into its most cheerful tone, and then swiped to answer. Mike's face appeared on the video call. Behind him was a stark white wall, and the pale fluorescent light made his face look gaunter and more tired than usual. "My love," he said, "I really couldn't make it home this year. The shipment of frozen seafood on my end is stuck in customs at the port of Melbourne. The partners are playing hardball, and I have to stay and sort it out." I looked at my husband, a wave of sorrow mixed with disappointment washing over me, but I forced a smile, my voice gentle. "I understand," I said. "Work is important, and you should focus on finishing it. Back home, my parents and I can handle Thanksgiving just fine. Make sure to take care of your health." Mike nodded, his expression filled with guilt. He apologized profusely and promised to make it up to me with a trip to Europe after the new year. "I have to go to an urgent meeting with the customs officials," he added. Just as he was about to end the call, the phone in his hand shook violently, as if someone had just bumped into him. Immediately after, a shrill sound pierced the fabricated reality he was trying to create. It was the cry of a newborn baby. Wah, 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 wah. The cry, though faint, was so clear and resonant, it was as if the baby were right beside my ear. My heart skipped a beat. The hands holding my phone began to tremble. But before I could speak, a sweet, cloying female voice drifted into the call. "Honey, he just spit up all over his blanket," the voice said. "Can you grab a burp cloth for me? Hurry up." The face of Mike on the screen turned ashen, drained of all color. He fumbled so badly that he dropped the phone onto a table. The last image I saw before the screen went black was a corner of a pastel pink blanket and the slender hands of some woman hastily picking up the baby. The call ended abruptly. Silence engulfed me, punctuated only by the soft bubbling of the brisket on the stove. The sound was suddenly mocking, bitterly ironic. I didn't scream, nor did I call back to interrogate or curse him like the betrayed women in the movies. I stood frozen in the middle of my kitchen, feeling as if someone had just sucked all the air from my lungs. My chest tightened with a pain so sharp it stole my breath, yet no cry would come. I slowly placed the phone down on the cold marble countertop, my eyes staring blankly at the pot of brisket, its sauce slowly reducing. So, this was the reason. He was too busy to come home for the holiday, the reason his work was always so stressful. It was all a clumsy charade to conceal another home, another life he was nurturing across the ocean. I remembered the Garmin smartwatch I had given him last month. It was an expensive birthday gift, ostensibly for him to monitor his heart health because he often complained of fatigue. Trembling, I opened the location tracking app on my phone. The red dot indicating his location wasn't at the windy, industrial port of Melbourne. It was blinking at a completely different coordinate. The words on the screen were brutally clear. Street Vincent's Private Hospital, Melbourne. I turned off the gas stove. The blue flame vanished in an instant, and with it, the last ember of marital affection in my heart was extinguished. I looked around the luxurious kitchen, at the expensive appliances I had once proudly purchased to care for him. Now, they all seemed meaningless and strangely alien. I realized I was not the lady of this mansion. I was merely a dedicated housekeeper, a money manager, and a perfect facade for that treacherous man. After that moment of paralysis, a chilling calm crept into every cell of my body. I would not allow myself to be weak, for I knew that tears were the most extravagant and useless luxury right now. I picked up my phone, scrolled through my contacts, and stopped at a name. Rebecca, luxury consignment. She was a contact in the world of high-end and antique goods in Chicago, someone I had done business with a few times. I dialed her number, and my voice came out crisp and cold, a stark contrast to the tremor in my soul. Rebecca, it's Liz, I said. I want to liquidate some household items. Could you send your people over right now? Yes, the sooner, the better. I want everything cleared out before Thanksgiving morning. Rebecca, with the sharp instincts of a seasoned dealer, seemed to sense a crisis, but asked no questions. She just agreed enthusiastically and promised to be there with her appraisal team within 30 minutes. I hung up and walked swiftly upstairs, heading straight for Mike's office. The large room was a shrine to his expensive hobbies, things he cherished more than his own wife. I opened the glass display cabinet, where bottles of French and Italian vintage wines, some decades old, rested silently on oak shelves. Next was the Macintosh sound system, worth over $100,000, a system that required me to walk on tiptoes and speak in whispers whenever he was listening, so as not to disturb his auditory experience. I gathered everything, leaving nothing behind. I opened his bedside drawer and pulled out the Capture collection of Patek Philippe and Rolex watches that he treated as his own life. The watches he once said he was saving as heirlooms for our future children. Well, his children, the son and heir he had so desperately craved, were all the way in Australia. So, what was the point of keeping these things here? Exactly 30 minutes later, Rebecca and a formidable team descended upon my house like a whirlwind. They quickly appraised, priced, and packed. The ripping sound of packing tape and the thudding footsteps of the movers echoed through the once quiet mansion. Rebecca gave me a look of concern when I pointed to the Purcell collection of prized bonsai trees on the balcony, plants Mike had poured fortune and countless hours into nurturing, fussing over every single leaf. I told her to take them all, any price would do, as long as she got them out of my daffins sight immediately. She nodded and quickly settled on a price. The total sum from this lightning-fast liquidation reached a staggering figure, enough to buy a couple of luxury condos outright. Rebecca asked if I wanted cash or a wire transfer to my personal account. I shook my head, my gaze firm. I asked her to wire the money, but not to my account. I gave her the account numbers for a reputable children's charity and a well-known shelter for single mothers, which I had already prepared. Please specify in the transfer details a holiday donation from Michael and Elizabeth, I instructed her. I was well aware of community property laws. If I transferred the money to my gratis apres own account, he could sue me for liquidating shared assets. But if it was a charitable donation, made in the names of both husband and wife, with official receipts and certificates of merit, he wouldn't dare try to reclaim it. If he even thought of demanding the money back from a charity, the pristine reputation as a successful entrepreneur that he had so painstakingly built would shatter into a million pieces. His company's stock would plummet. It was a trap of benevolence, my parting gift to him. Within 4 hours, the $1 million mansion became stark and cold in the most literal sense. The expensive oil paintings on the walls were gone, leaving behind faint, grimy rectangles. The wine cabinet was empty, the sound system had vanished, and even the decorative plants were gone. The house was now just 4 walls, and the living room sofa, which Rebecca had deemed unworthy of taking. I sat down on that lone sofa. Looking around the cavernous living room, I felt as if I were sitting in the middle of a battlefield after the fighting had ended. I took a pre-signed divorce petition from my purse, and placed it neatly on the Bursens' glass coffee table. Next to it, I placed the diamond-level donor certificate that the charity had just emailed me a soft copy of. I had taken the liberty of printing it out in full color. I looked at the house one last time, the place that was once my home, my youth, my every hope. Now, it was just a soulless shell. I pulled my small, pre-packed suitcase, which contained only a few simple outfits and my most important personal documents. I walked out the door without a backward glance. The heavy mahogany door clicked shut behind me, a dry, final sound, like the period at the end of a long, deceitful sentence. The next day, I was sitting on the balcony of a secluded resort in Key West, Florida. The salty sea breeze whipped through my messy hair, carrying with it the untamed spirit of the ocean. On the table was a half-melted margarita, salt, clinging to the rim of the glass. Beside it, my phone vibrated incessantly on the glass tabletop, emitting a series of frantic buzzes like the desperate cries of a wounded animal. The screen glowed, displaying the number 66 inches the missed calls log. All of them were from a familiar name that now seemed utterly foreign, Mike. I knew exactly what was happening on the other end of the line, because I was the one who had set the timer on that bomb. It had all started with the string of account activity alerts that hit my phone late last night, when I used the secondary credit card linked to his account to pay the exorbitant fees for emergency international shipping for a few of his designer items I had sent off for consignment. Over in Australia, Mike must have received the debit notifications. With the suspicious nature of a crooked businessman, he would have known instantly that something was terribly wrong. Back home, I could picture him frantically trying to check the security cameras on his phone, only to be met with a hopeless black screen, because I had carefully shut off the main circuit breaker before I left. Mike must have abandoned his new mistress and his precious newborn son in the hospital, scrambling to buy the most expensive business class ticket to fly back to Chicago that very night. At noon today, when the taxi carrying him pulled up to the mansion's gates, they was certain the scene before him would have made him freeze in his tracks. The iron gates were wide open, the yard eerily empty. The valuable bonsai trees were gone, leaving dark brown circles on the white patio stones. Stepping inside, he wasn't greeted by the smell of a hot Thanksgiving dinner or the gentle smile of his devoted wife, but by a chilling, cavernous emptiness. The plush Italian leather sofa was gone, the gleaming wine cabinet had vanished, even the curved screen TV he loved to watch football on had disappeared without a trace. The $1 million mansion was now nothing more than an empty shell, cold and lifeless. And there, in the middle of that vast living room, was the sole remaining object. The certificate of philanthropy, which I had printed in color and laminated, placed neatly on the floor like a final, poisonous taunt at his greed. The phone buzzed for the 67th time. I took a sip of my margarita. The sour tang of lime and the sharp kick of tequila spread across my tongue, numbing but clarifying. I swiped to answer, and before I could even bring the phone to my ear, Mike's roar erupted from the speaker, tearing through the peaceful ocean. Are you insane? He screamed. Where is the house? Where are my things? Where? Did you take the money? He called me a miserable bitch and threatened to call the cops and have me thrown in jail right now. I listened in silence, letting his vulgar curses wash over me like the distant crash of waves. There was a time when even a slightly raised voice from him would make my heart clench in fear, afraid I had done something to displease him. But now, hearing his voice hoarse with rage, I found it almost laughable. A man who always saw himself as the one in control, the pillar of the family, was now panicking like a child whose favorite toy had been taken away. I took a deep breath, my voice so calm, it surprised even me. Hello, I'm sorry, but you have the wrong number, I said. The other end fell silent for a second, then he roared again. What do you mean? Wrong number? This is Mike. Don't you dare play your crazy games with me. I cut him off, my voice as light as a breeze, but as sharp as a razor. I didn't say wrong person, I said wrong number. This number belongs to your ex-wife, that foolish woman named Liz. But the person on the line now, your wife, she died yesterday. The moment she heard your son crying in Australia. If you're looking for your wife, go back to St. Vincent's Hospital and find her. Don't call this number again. With that, I hung up decisively and blocked his number. The sound of the waves, Laeton to shore returned. But inside me, the storm was just beginning. I knew Mike wouldn't give up easily. But I was no longer a lamb, waiting for scraps of lamb. Affection. My manufactured peace lasted exactly 15 minutes before a call came from an assail. Unknown number. I knew it was Mike. He must have borrowed a phone from someone, perhaps the taxi driver or a neighborhood security guard, to continue his psychological assault. This time, I answered immediately. Before he could unleash another torrent of abuse, I put the call on speaker and placed my phone next to a digital recorder. His voice, raspy and grating like metal on metal, came through. Liz, you listen to me, he snarled. I've already called my lawyer and the tax dixtitem. Local police. What you did is theft of property and unlawful liquidation of shared assets. You think you can just sell everything and run away? You'd better cough up the money you got from the sale, plus the cash from the safe, while you still can. If you don't, I swear I'll put you in a cell and let you rot. I let out a soft, bitter laugh. So, in his eyes, 5 years of marriage, of shared intimacy, could be quantified in dollar signs, prison sentences, and threats. I responded calmly. Mike, you're a big-shot businessman. How can you be so ignorant of the law? I didn't steal anything. I was exercising my right to manage our shared marital assets for a charitable cause. Didn't you see the certificate and the wire transfer receipts I left for you in the middle of the Tay-Pals living room? His voice faltered, the aggression replaced by utter bewilderment. What did you say? The entire proceeds from the sale, plus all the cash in the safe, a total of $750,000, I wired it all to the children's 3 men's charity and the women's shelter. I enunciated each word clearly. On the 60H transfer memo, I wrote very clearly, a donation from Michael and Elizabeth. The tax receipts, the thank you letters, the certificate of merit. They're all in both of our names. You're the biggest philanthropist in the city right now. The papers will probably run a big story tomorrow. You should prepare yourself to receive an award. The line went dead silent. I could hear Mike's heavy, ragged breathing. He understood, better than anyone, the trap I had laid. If I had transferred that money to my private account, he could have sued me, frozen my assets. But now that it was in the hands of a legitimate charity, donated under both our names, it had become untouchable. If he dared to file a lawsuit to get it back, if he dared to cry foul that his wife had given away their money without his consent, then the prestigious reputation of a successful entrepreneur, the benevolent image he had so carefully crafted to polish his brand, would instantly crumble to dust. You dare to set me up? He hissed through clenched teeth, his voice a mixture of seething hatred and utter helplessness. I'm just helping you accumulate good karma for your precious son in Australia, I added softly, delivering another devastating blow. Just imagine, if tomorrow's headlines read, CEO of Genesis Corp. In charity fraud scandal, demands return of donations to orphans to support Mistress. Where do you think your company's stock price will go? How will your business partners look at you? This society might forgive many things, but preying on people's compassion, they'll drag you down into the mud. I heard a loud crash on the other end. He had probably thrown the phone against the wall. He knew he had lost. Lost in the most painful and humiliating way. He was being forced to be a good person, forced to wear the cloak of an philanthropist, while his insides were twisting in knots over the lost money. The hollow honor he valued more than his own life had now become the noose tightening around his neck. I ended the call and looked out at the ocean. The sun was setting, painting the red sky and water in shades of crimson. I remembered the old days, how I used to pinch every penny, not even daring to buy myself a decent lipstick, just to save money for him to expand his business. Now, that money was finally being put to good use. At the very least, it was bringing smiles to the faces of unfortunate children, which was far better than him squandering it on his lecherous pursuits. I had no regrets, not a single one. That certificate of philanthropy was my immunity, and it was the sentence on his conscience. Mike didn't dare call the police, nor did he dare make a scene about the charity donation. He chose to swallow his rage to protect his image. But I knew a terrier, da compass, taco, wounded animal would only become more ferocious and would thrash about looking for a way out. He started desperately trying to manage his cash flow. Without liquid assets, his company was like a car that had run out of gas on a steep mountain pass. I received notifications from my banking system that he was attempting to open new lines of credit and take out high-interest loans from shady lenders to keep the company afloat, and undoubtedly, to send money to Ashley and her son in Australia. But Mike had forgotten one crucial detail. For the past 5 years, who was the town's one managing the company's books and cash flow behind the scenes? It was me. I knew about every bad debt, every fake profit and hidden loss he had used to pretty up his company's profile. Before I left, I had discreetly sent a welder Complete, unvarnished set of financial records to our key credit partners and trusted banks, under the guise of an anonymous shareholder concerned about risk. The results came immediately, like a row of falling dominoes. That evening, I received a text from a friend who managed a 5-star steakhouse in downtown Chicago, a favorite haunt for the city's elite. She recounted the events of this night like a tragicomedy. Mike had taken 3 major potential investors out to dinner to discuss a capital injection. He ordered the most expensive bottles of wine, the finest cuts of Wagyu, and imported seafood to show off his status. The dinner went smoothly, filled with the clinking of glasses and cheerful talk of multi-million-dollar projects. When it was time to pay, Mike confidently pulled out his prestigious black card and handed it to the server. But a few minutes later, the server returned, bowing her head apologetically and whispering that the card was declined. Mike frowned and snapped that it was impossible. The card had a $500,000 limit, and told her to run it again. The trembling server tried again, then tried a second card, and a third. All of them returned errors. Transaction failed or card blocked. It turned out I had reported all the supplementary cards and joint accounts under my primary name as lost, requesting they be frozen. As for his personal cards, they had been suspended by the banks due to suspected liquidity issues, following his pocket, emptying charity donation, and the damning financial report I had just sent them. The atmosphere in the private dining room grew thick and silent. The investors exchanged glances, their polite smiles vanishing, replaced by looks of suspicion and contempt. A businessman who had just been waxing lyrical about $1 million project couldn't even pay for a several $1,000 dinner. His credibility instantly plummeted into the dawn. Negative. In the end, Mike had to swallow his pride and call his assistant to bring cash to bail him out, but no amount of money could wash away the stinging humiliation. Soon after, my phone rang again. An unknown number. It was Mike's voice, but this time it wasn't aggressive or threatening. It was the sound of a cornered man grinding his teeth. Liz, you're trying to ruin me. What did you send to the banks? Why are all my cards blocked? I was lying down with a facial mask on, a small smile playing on my lips. I'm just fulfilling my duty as a good wife, I replied smoothly. Seeing you spend money so lavishly, I thought I'd help you save by locking a few cards to curb your extravagance. As for the banks, they probably saw how much you donated to charity and got worried you were going bankrupt. You should really reflect on your lifestyle. He was speechless, then slammed the phone down. I knew this was just a gentle warning shot. The feeling of being invisibly strangled by debt, of having society doubt your financial stability, was far more terrifying than simply losing money. He was starting to taste the same helplessness I had once endured. The feeling of wanting to scream but having your throat squeezed by unseen hands. The declined credit cards of today were society's rejection of a DAFL, faithless man. News that Mike had been fleeced by his wife, leaving him with an empty house, eventually reached the ears of Carol, his mother. My mother-in-law, a woman who always boasted about her CEO son, and publicly belittled me as a dependent freeloader, was now in a frenzy. She had heard Mike's tearful phone call, his tale of how I had sold off their home and run away, leaving him to sleep on the palace cold floor. Without bothering to hear the whole story, Carol immediately caught a bus to Chicago, fueled by the righteous fury of a queen mother coming to demand justice for her prince. Early the next morning, I received a text from the security guard of our gated community, informing me that an older woman in flashy clothes was standing at my gate, screaming and causing a scene. I checked the cameras. I had remotely reactivated the surveillance system without Mike's knowledge. The image of Carol was crystal clear. She wore a shiny, lime green silk pantsuit, a gold chain as thick as a dog's leash around her neck, and carried a frove tacky, oversized tote bag stuffed with odd belongings she brought from her small town. She stood before the locked iron gate, banging on it with her fists and shouting, "Where is Liz? That miserable wretch, get out here right now. You stole my son's money, you dismantled my son's house. You are a wicked, heartless woman, a piece of trash." Neighbors started peeking out from their windows, pointing and gossiping. The more of an audience she drew, the more dramatic her performance became. She threw a massive tantrum right on the sidewalk, waving her arms and wailing. "Oh, everyone, come and see. We raised a snake in our house, a viper in our own family. My daughter-in-law cheated my son out of all his money, and ran off with another man, leaving my boy with nothing. If there's a God in heaven, strike her down." I watched her on the screen, a mixture of bitterness and disgust rising in me. This woman, for the past 5 years, I had cared for her dutifully, providing everything from health supplements and silk clothes to money for her home repairs and for her various relatives. And now, without knowing the full story, she was ready to trample all over my reputation in broad daylight. Seeing that no one was coming to the gate, Carol belligerently stood up, dusted off her pants, and turned to the security guard, asking for the address of the company where that Liz worked. She declared that she was going there to tear that vixen apart and demand justice for her son. The guard looked at her hesitantly, but gave her the address. Carol hastily hailed an Uber and sped off. In a blind rage. She had no idea she was walking straight into the lion's den. I was no longer at home for her to bully. I was at my office, a place where power and law reigned supreme. And more importantly, I held a secret that would make her kneel and beg. I turned off the camera feed and instructed my receptionist that an older woman would be coming to see me soon. I told her to show the woman into the conference room, offer her tea, but to not let anyone disturb us. I would give her a proper welcome. I straightened the collar of my blazer and looked at myself in the mirror. My eyes no longer held the submissive, gentle look of the predation dutiful daughter-in-law of the past. Today, I was going to teach Carol a lesson about respect and karma, a lesson she should have learned a long, long time ago. The investment firm where I worked was located on a high floor of a magnificent glass tower in the heart of downtown Chicago, a place where the hurried footsteps of office workers and the rhythmic clatter of keyboards created a steady, professional hum. That quiet, sophisticated atmosphere was suddenly torn apart by a shrill, piercing voice echoing up from the reception area. I was reviewing a client file when I heard the familiar commotion. I sighed softly and put down my pen. I knew the hurricane named Carol, my mother-in-law, had officially made landfall. She hadn't come to visit her daughter-in-law, she had come to unleash her fury on behalf of her disgraced golden boy. I stepped out of my office and stood on the mezzanine, looking down at the Dacian's lobby. The sight of Carol amidst this modern, corporate setting was jarring and somewhat comical. She was dressed in that blindingly bright, lime green silk pantsuit, her neck adorned with the thick gold chain, her face heavily made up with garish red lipstick that was currently contorting as she hurled insults. In her hand, she clutched an orange Hermes Birkin bag, a gift Mike had given her for her birthday last year. She treated it like a precious treasure, carrying it everywhere to show off her son's wealth and filial piety. Only Mike and I knew. It was a high-quality knockoff he'd bought online. But I had never had the heart to expose that truth, wanting to preserve a shred of dignity for her in her old age. The moment Carol spotted me, she flew into a rage. She slammed the bag down on the marble reception desk with a loud thud. She pointed a finger straight at my face and shrieked, "You, Liz. Get down here right now. You are a disrespectful daughter-in-law, a woman with no morals. You cheated your husband out of all his money and now you're hiding in this place? Give my son his money back. Give him his house back. Now." My colleagues started whispering amongst themselves. Curious and concerned glances were thrown my way. They could never have imagined that their usually calm and decisive female boss had such a crass and belligerent mother-in-law. I felt no shame or fear. On the contrary, I pitied her. Carol had spent her entire life scheming and being venomous, yet she lived in a fog of ignorance and lies, spun by her own son. She had come here demanding justice, not knowing that she was about to personally tear down the facade of her own family's respectability. In front of the world, I signaled to the security guards not to intervene too forcefully and calmly walked towards her. I looked directly into her bloodshot eyes, my voice soft but firm. "Carol, this is a professional office," I said. "Please don't cause a scene and disturb everyone. I haven't run anywhere. I'm still here, working to support myself. If you want to talk things out, please come to the conference room. I will speak with you properly." Carol was taken aback for a moment by my composure. She was probably used to the image of her daughter-in-law Liz, who always bowed her head in submission, always meekly agreeing whenever she was scolded at home. This change unnerved her, but her ego and greed still overpowered her reason. She snorted, snatched her designer bag, and said with a toss of her head that fine, she would go in. She wanted to see what other tricks I had up my sleeve. Today, she swore, if she didn't get the money back for Mike, she wouldn't leave. I led her to the soundproof glass conference room, asked my assistant to prepare a pot of lotus tea, and then closed the door, leaving the curious onlookers behind. In the cold room with its 4 glass walls, it was just her and me. A showdown between 2 women, who once called each other mother and daughter, now standing on opposite sides of a war over honor and greed. I pulled out a chair for her, but Carol remained standing, hands on her hips, preparing for another tirade. She had no idea I had a special gift prepared for her, something that would silence her for good. Carol refused to sit down. She paced the room, the sharp clicks of her heels on the hardwood floor betraying her impatience and fury. She slammed her handbag onto the conference table and glared at me. She told me not to play for time. She said the house was earned by Mike, and I was just a freeloader with no right to sell it. She demanded to know where I had moved the money and told me to cough it up immediately, or she would call the police and have me arrested for Phew. I sat down in the chairman's seat and leisurely poured a cup of hot tea. The steam rose in fragrant wisps of lotus, a stark contrast to the tense, suffocating atmosphere. I looked at her, my gaze a mixture of pity and cold. You always thought of me as a freeloader, I said. But have you ever wondered why your son's company has been consistently losing money while still taking on new projects? You always blamed me for not helping him, but you are the one stabbing him in the back. Carol flinched, her eyes darting around nervously. What nonsense are you talking about? She sputtered. I am his mother. I only want him to be rich and successful. I would never harm him. I didn't argue. I silently took a small digital recorder from my blazer pocket, placed it on the table, and pressed play. A faint static sound gave way to the retom. Soft background music of a familiar tea house on the outskirts of the city, a backdrop to a crystal-clear conversation between 2 people. One voice was Carol's, smooth and calculating. The other belonged to a man, a notoriously crooked construction materials supplier. On the recording, Carol's voice was sickeningly sweet. She was reassuring the brawny man not to worry, that her son Mike trusted her completely and never checked that details. She instructed him to use substandard, unapproved concrete mixtures. She told him to skimp on the cement by 1/3, replacing it with a cheaper grade, as long as the exterior looked good. She said the difference in cost should be wired directly to her private account, without Mike or his wife knowing. She mentioned she was in a bind with a loan payment and promised him future contracts if he helped her out. Carol's face went from flushed with anger to deathly pale. She trembled and stumbled backward, her hand grabbing the back of a chair for support. Her eyes were wide with terror, fixed on the tiny recorder that was broadcasting her damning confession. She could not believe that her secret meeting in a quiet corner of a tea house 6 months ago had been recorded in its entirety. I turned off the recorder, and a chilling silence filled the room. I looked at her, my voice low and heavy. Did you know that the projects you embezzled from are now facing lawsuits from developers due to cracked walls and sinking foundations? I asked. Mike is running around everywhere trying to pay for the damages. The company's taxon's reputation has plummeted. All because of the substandard materials you colluded to use. For greed, for a few dirty kickbacks to feed your gambling addiction, you were willing to push your own son toward ruin and prison. Carol stammered, beads of sweat breaking out on her forehead, smearing her thick makeup and revealing the wrinkled roadmap of her fear. She claimed she was just borrowing the money temporarily and intended to pay it back once she won big. She demanded to know how I got the recording. I was the one who managed the finances, I replied coldly. Did you really? I think you could pull the wool over my eyes? I stood up and walked closer to her. If this recording were sent to the board of the partner company, and the Baxo authorities, what do you think would happen? Mike would go to jail for negligence, causing serious consequences. And you would go to jail for embezzlement and fraud. What would become of the proud title of CEO's mother? That you flaunted? Carol slumped into the chair, her hands covering her face. She knew she was cornered. But that wasn't all. I had one final card to play, one that would ensure she would never dare to bother me again. A card named debt. Carol sat huddled in the plush leather chair, her earlier aggression completely gone, replaced by the image of a pathetic old woman, trembling before the verdict of her conscience and the law. But I knew her remorse was just a fleeting fear. Greed and selfishness were etched into her very being. If I didn't cut off all her escape routes, she would turn and bite me again at any moment. I opened my briefcase, took out a document with a prominent red stamp, and placed it gently on the table in front of her. Take a good look, I told her, my voice as calm as if I were discussing the weather. This is a debt assignment agreement for the $150,000 loan you took out last month from that loan shark, Knuckles Malone, to fund your gambling habit. Do you remember? At the mention of Knuckles Malone, Carol jumped as if she'd been scalded. He was the source of her terror for the past few months, the threatening late-night calls, the texts promising to smash her windows or break her legs if she didn't pay the interest on time. She lifted her cloudy eyes to the paper, her trembling hand picking it up. The words swam before her, but the core message was unmistakable. The lender, Knuckles Malone, had legally transferred the entire debt, principal and interest, to the debt buyer, a collection agency that was a B-front company I had authorized. And the person behind that authorization was none other than me. You bought my debt? Carol gasped, her voice cracking with horror. Why would you do that? What are you going to do to me? I crossed my arms and looked down at her. I didn't want you to be harassed by thugs, so I stepped in to take on your debt. But, Carol, paying what you owe is a timeless rule. Now, I am your creditor. I don't use street justice, I use the law. With this promissory note and that audio recording, I can make you lose everything. Your house back home, your property, and what's left of your freedom. Carol's jaw dropped. She never imagined that the daughter-in-law she had always dismissed as useless and dependent could be so ruthless and decisive. She had walked right into a trap woven from her own bottomless greed. I continued, each word like a hammer blow to her psyche. You have two choices. Now. 1. You go back to your town, live a quiet life, and never show your face here again to bother me or demand anything. I will consider this debt forgiven. You can live out the rest of your days in peace. Or 2, if you dare to open your mouth to slander me or incite Mike to sue me, then tomorrow, a formal complaint and a debt collection notice will be sent directly to your local authorities. Choose. The air in the room was thick with tension. Carol knew she had no way out. She had been utterly defeated by the daughter-in-law she had once tried to kick out of the house. She stood up shakily, not daring to look me in the eye. She mumbled that she would go back home right away, and begged me not to do anything. She turned and stumbled towards the door, a wretched, pathetic figure, like a thief caught red-handed. She left in such a hurry that she forgot her Hermes handbag on the table. I looked at the bright orange bag lying there, abandoned. It was just like the bright orange bag. Gaudy, fake life, she and her son had led shiny on the outside, but empty and fraudulent on the inside. Hey, you forgot your bag, I called after her. Carol froze, turned her head to look at the bag, then shook her head violently. Her eyes filled with fear, as if it were a ticking time bomb. She opened the door and shuffled out, disappearing behind the glass. I sat alone in the conference room, looking through the glass at the bustling street below. I had won this battle, but I felt no sense of triumphant joy, only a profound sadness. Family, the most sacred of bonds, had ultimately been reduced to promissory notes and threats. While Carol was trudging back to the bus station to flee to her hometown. On another front, the queen of our story, Ashley, my husband's precious mistress, was touching down at O'Hare. After more than a year abroad, Ashley returned with the tictioned, triumphant air of a conqueror, holding the son she claimed was the heir, her head held high, ready to embrace the life of luxury Mike had promised her. The Ascension FDA airport was hot and humid, a chaotic crush of people. Ashley pushed an expensive stroller, dressed head to toe in a new designer outfit, a pair of oversized sunglasses hiding half her face as she tried to project the image of a wealthy Socialite. She scanned the arrivals area, searching for the gleaming black Maybach Mike always bragged about, but she couldn't find a single luxury car. Instead, a battered, scratched four-door sedan, a ride-share, slowly pulled up. The window rolled down to reveal Mike's gaunt face, covered in stubble. He didn't get out to open the door for her as he usually would. He just jerked his head, signaling for her to get in. Ashley was stunned. She pulled down her sunglasses, frowning. "Honey, where's your car?" she asked. "Why are you picking us up in this dump? You want your son to ride in this smelly thing?" Mike's face contorted in annoyance, his voice sharp. "Get in the car and stop asking so many questions," he snapped. "The other car is in for maintenance, and the driver called in sick. I had to get a ride here myself. Do you have any idea how stressed out I am?" Ashley pouted but reluctantly bundled the baby into the cramped car. The musty smell of the old air conditioner hit her face, making her feel nauseous. The entire drive home, Mike was silent. The air in the car was tense and suffocating. Ashley chattered on about how tiring the flight was and how fussy the baby had been, but Mike just grunted in response, his mind clearly elsewhere, on the debts and emptiness that awaited him. When the taxi finally stopped in front of the mansion in Lincoln Park, Ashley's spirits lifted slightly. She stepped out of the car and gazed at the imposing building, a smug thought crossing her mind. Finally, she was the mistress of this house. She pushed open the door with a beaming smile. "Oh, our house is so beautiful, honey. It's so big, the baby will have so much room to run around." But that smile vanished the moment she stepped over the threshold. Before her was a vast, empty space. There were no art pieces on the walls, no magnificent crystal chandeliers, none of the luxurious furniture she had seen in his video calls. The walls were marked with faint, rectangular shadows, ghosts of the Capelas. Paintings that had been removed. The floor was dusty, and her footsteps echoed eerily in the hollow house. "Mike. What is this?" Ashley stammered, her voice trembling. "Where is everything? Why does it look like an abandoned house? Did you get robbed?" Mike leaned against the doorframe, looking at her with tired, defeated eyes. He gave a bitter laugh. "Not robbers. It was my ex-wife. She cleared everything out. Sold it all. Now this house is just 4 walls. If you want to be the lady, of the house, you can pay to furnish it yourself." Ashley froze, the designer handbag slipping from her grasp and hitting the floor. With a thud. Her dream of a life of pampered luxury suddenly shattered like a soap bubble. She looked around the empty house, then at the sleeping baby in her arms. For the first time, a vague sense of unease crept into her heart. In the cavernous mansion, the rattling of a cheap box fan was the only sound, like the sigh of a bygone era. Ashley sat on the floor on an old fur rug I had left behind, holding her baby, who was wailing from the heat. The central air conditioning had been cut off due to unpaid bills. The sweltering Chicago summer afternoon caused the thick layer of makeup on her face to melt into a streaky mess. Mike had left early that morning, probably off again, scrambling to borrow money from anyone he could to fill the ever-widening financial pit he was in. The front door creaked open, and Carol walked in. She looked haggard, a far cry from the belligerent woman who had stormed out that morning. She had just endured a terrifying interrogation with me, where all her pride and dignity had been stripped away. But Carol was a woman who had lived her whole life behind a fix and steez mask. She took a deep breath, smoothed her messy hair, and forced a weak smile. When she saw Ashley, she knew that, at this moment, this backup daughter-in-law and her heir grandson were the last life raft she could cling to, her only hope for a peaceful family life, or at least a place to stay now that she couldn't go home. She walked over, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. "Oh, my precious grandson. Why are you crying like that? Where's your mother? Why aren't you comforting him? The poor thing is sweating so much." Ashley looked up, her sharp eyes flashing with disappointment and blame. She pouted, her voice full of petulance. "So, Grandma's back? Mike is nowhere to be found. This house is like an oven. I thought I was coming here to be a queen, but it's worse than the tiny apartment I had overseas. At this rate, I'd be better off taking my son and going back to my mother's." Hearing the words "back to my mother's," Carol flinched. She was less afraid of the freed losing her grandson and more afraid of losing face. She quickly sat down, her wrinkled hand patting the baby's back, then pretended to rummage through the phyllo pocket of her blouse. She pulled out an old red velvet box. Inside was a glossy, deep green, jadeite bangle. She took Ashley's hand and slipped the bangle onto her pale wrist. "Don't say such things, dear," Carol cooed. "Mike is just going through a rough patch. Everything will be fine. This is the family heirloom. I was going to give it to Liz, but I felt she wasn't worthy, so I kept it. Now I'm giving it to you. You are the true daughter-in-law, the one who gave birth to the heir of this family." Ashley looked at the green bangle on her wrist, her eyes lighting up a little. She had no idea that the real family heirloom, a priceless Burmese jadeite piece, passed down from Mike's Vietnamese ancestors, had been sold by me along with the rest of the jewelry weeks ago. The one Carol was putting on her wrist was a Princess cheap glass imitation she'd bought at a Chinatown market for a few dollars to wear on her temple visits. But with Ashley's greed and ignorance, coupled with the CEO's mother act that Carol was still desperately trying to maintain, she bought it hook, line, and sinker. "Are you serious, Mom? Is this really valuable?" Ashley asked, her tone softening as she admired the bangle. "Very valuable, dear. It's been in the family for generations. Wear it for good. Look, it will bring prosperity to your husband and bless your son," Carol lied through her teeth, her eyes darting nervously around the empty house. "Just be patient for a little while, my dears. As soon as Mike gets some money, he'll buy even nicer furniture, and then you'll live like royalty." I sat in a coffee shop across the street, watching the scene unfold on my phone, which was connected to a hidden camera in the living room. I couldn't help but let out a bitter laugh. A deceitful old woman, a gold-digging mistress, and a Dashin-2 fake bracelet. They were performing a touching family drama built on a prasat foundation of lies, clinging to each other with empty promises while their entire family teetered on the brink of an abyss. In the days that followed, the financial pressure mounted on Mike, turning him into a cornered animal. With no cash and his credit cards blocked, his business partners turned their backs on him. He would come home drunk and irritable. Ashley realized her dream of wealth was evaporating, but she wasn't about to leave empty-handed. With the calculating nature of a homewrecker, Ashley proposed a despicable plan to Mike. "Use public opinion to force me to divide the yens. Public opinion to force me to divide assets." She believed that a woman's reputation was her greatest vulnerability, and once I was publicly shamed, I would have to bow to their demands. The next morning, as I opened my laptop to start work, a flood of notifications from various social media groups popped up. Anonymous posts with sensational and headlines were spreading like wildfire. A vicious businesswoman kicks her husband and elderly mother out onto the street. The truth about the barren, jealous wife. A tycoon cheated out of his fortune by ex-wife after wanting a child. Below the posts were cleverly edited photos showing the empty house and a staged shot of Carol sobbing pitifully, all orchestrated by Ashley. Ashley even created fake accounts, posing as concerned neighbors or bystanders, to leave slanderous comments about me. She wrote vicious lies, saying that this wife looked innocent, but had a heart of stone. Her husband wanted a child, but she couldn't conceive, so she turned vengeful. Or, so sorry for the husband, he worked so hard to support his wife, only to be cheated on and have his assets stolen. The fabricated stories were meticulously crafted to prey on the curiosity and judgmental nature of online communities. The climax was when Ashley went live on her personal page, holding her baby, tears streaming down her face as she told her sob story. She didn't mention me by name, but everyone knew who she was talking about. She cried that she knew her place as the one who came later, but how could that woman be so cruel as to destroy her and her baby's lives? Her baby was a newborn and needed formula, but that woman had sold all their things. Her elderly mother-in-law was also being threatened by that woman. In the comments section, thousands of people offered their sympathy and hurled insults at the evil wife, which was me, calling me a barren, poisonous tree. I sat there, silently reading every comment, my heart completely still. If this had been the old me, I probably would have been so devastated that I'd contemplate suicide to prove my innocence. But the me of today had weathered too many storms to know that crocodile tears could not muddy the truth. I looked at Those hateful words as I would a pile of foul-smelling garbage, disgusting, but not worth touching. I called my lawyer, my voice calm. Document every post, every comment, and Ashley's entire livestream. I want you to gather evidence of defamation and slander. Let them finish their performance. The more dramatic the play, the more tragic the ending would be. Mike and Ashley thought they held the upper hand, using the soft weapon of public opinion to destroy me. But they forgot one thing: public opinion is a double-edged sword. When the truth is revealed, that sword will swing back and slice through the mask of false morality they were so desperately trying to wear. I didn't need to defend myself. I would let my divinette actions speak for me. On Friday, the city's annual High Society Charity Gala was held at a 6-star hotel overlooking the river. This was an event that brought together the most powerful figures, a place where handshakes were worth millions and relationships were forged over glasses of vintage wine. Mike, despite being buried in debt, had managed to scalp a ticket to be there, hoping to find a lifeline, or at least salvage some of his tattered reputation. He brought Ashley along. She wore a daring, high-slit evening gown, trying to look sophisticated, but her darting, avaricious eyes betrayed her provincial, social climbing nature. As the spotlight hit the red carpet, all attention suddenly shifted to the main entrance. A pristine white Rolls-Royce Phantom pulled up. The door opened, and I stepped out. Not as a broken, abandoned wife, but as a true queen. I was wearing a chic, tailored white power suit that accentuated my slender figure. My hair was swept up in an elegant, proud bun. I wore no extravagant jewelry, only a platinum phoenix-shaped brooch on my lapel. Walking beside me was James, Mike's fiercest business rival, a man of sophistication and power, whom Mike had always envied. Our entrance caused a stir throughout the ballroom. Whispers rippled through the crowd. "Isn't that Mike's ex-wife? My God, she looks so different, what an aura." I heard she was the real brains behind Genesis Corp. I smiled and nodded at old acquaintances, my gaze sweeping over the crowd and landing on a corner where Mike and Ashley stood frozen. Mike stared at me, his eyes wide with a mixture of astonishment, desire, and regret. He had never seen me so radiant. In his memory, I was just the wife in an apron, bustling around the kitchen. And Ashley? She gripped her wine glass so tightly, her knuckles turned white, her nails digging into her palm with envy. She recognized the chasm in class between the genuine article and a cheap imitation. She was desperately showing skin to attract attention, while all I had to do was stand there, my confidence and intelligence shining brighter than any diamond. Ashley whispered something into Mike's ear, her tone full of incitement. She pulled out her phone and started a surreptitious livestream, aiming the camera at me with a malicious caption. "Ex-wife cavorts with tycoon, abandons husband and child, a hypocrite at a charity event." She thought that by smearing me here, she could ruin me in front of the elite. But she didn't realize her sneaky actions only highlighted her own lowliness. I turned to James. He gave me a subtle wink. I knew my moment had come. I wasn't here to squabble with someone like Ashley. I was here to redefine my own worth. The event's host spoke into the microphone, his voice booming. "And now, we are honored to invite Miss Elizabeth Wynne, founder of the Sunflower Legal Aid Foundation, to the stage for a few words." Thunderous applause erupted. I walked towards the stage, passing right in front of Mike and Ashley. My eyes didn't linger on them for even a second, as if they were just invisible specks of dust in this glittering space. I stood at the podium, looking out at the hundreds of faces looking up at me. In that crowd, I saw Mike's ashen face, and Ashley's phone held high, still live streaming. They were waiting for me to make a mistake, waiting for me to break down and cry about my personal life, to turn myself into a laughingstock. But I would not give them that satisfaction. Over the past few weeks, there have been many baseless rumors about me, about my seizing assets or being barren. I chose to remain silent because I believe a woman's worth is not defined by gossip, nor is it defined by whether or not she can bear a son to carry on a family name. Our worth lies in our intellect, our compassion, and our ability to take control of our own lives. I paused, a small, gentle smile on my lips. Therefore, I have decided to use the entirety of my divorce settlement, along with the profits from my personal investments, a total of $10 million to establish the Sunflower Legal Aid Foundation. This foundation will operate as a nonprofit dedicated to providing legal counsel and financial support to vulnerable women, those who are victims of domestic abuse, who have been stripped of their assets, and whose dignity has been trampled upon in their marriages. I glanced towards Ashley. She was frozen in place, the hand holding her phone, trembling. On her livestream screen, the hateful comments about me had vanished, replaced by a flood of messages from people changing their tune. Oh my God, she is pure class. That mistress should just turn off the stream, how humiliating. This woman is donating $10 million, and you're busy slandering her behind her back. Pathetic. Ashley frantically ended the live stream, her face burning with shame. She wanted the floor to swallow her whole. And Mike. He stood there as if struck by lightning. He understood that my counterattack didn't involve force or insults, but used decency and success to slap him across the face. I had used my own money, what was once our shared money, that I had cleverly moved and reinvested to protect women like me from despicable men like him. Modern women make their fortunes with their minds, not with their wombs, or their looks, I concluded, my words carrying immense weight, a direct and steely message to Ashley. I bowed to the audience and stepped down from the stage to a standing ovation. This feeling of victory wasn't the glee of seeing my enemies suffer, but the pride of knowing I had risen from the mud to shine. That night, following my earth-shaking speech at the gala, social media erupted in a media firestorm. The video of me announcing the foundation went viral, shared by celebrities and women's rights groups. The very people who had previously scorned and attacked me, believing Ashley's victim narrative, now did a complete 180. They dug up Ashley's old photos and posts, uncovering a multitude of inconsistencies in her fabricated story. The public was no longer a flock of sheep for her to lead. They became the harshest of judges, tearing away the mask to reveal the true face of a homewrecker trying to masquerade as a tea house victim. The next morning, as the stock market opened, the trading screens were a sea of ominous red for the stock of Genesis Corp. Investors panicked and sold off their shares en masse. They weren't afraid of the company's financial losses as much as they were afraid of being associated with the chairman of questionable morals, embroiled in a charity fraud scandal. Even though it was just a rumor, the damage was real. Mike's phone rang incessantly, not with calls of congratulation or partnership offers, but with death knells from banks, calling in his loans and demanding more collateral. I sat in my new office, sipping a black coffee, no sugar, and watched the stock chart of my ex-husband's company plummet like a runaway train. The feeling wasn't one of gleeful victory, but of quiet contemplation on the law of cause and effect. He had spent his life building a reputation on falsehoods. Now, those very falsehoods were the tomb of his career. Ashley, the once smug mistress, now dared not leave the house. The address of B. The shabby rental they were in was leaked online. Angry netizens sent funeral wreaths and death threats to her door. She had to deactivate all her social media accounts, hiding within four walls like a sewer rat afraid of the light. The fake designer items Carol had given her were now evidence of the absurdity of a pretentious family. Major partners began to terminate their contracts with Mike one by one. To refuse to do business with a man who had cheated on his devoted wife for a scandalous mistress. The price of betrayal sometimes doesn't come as a sudden bolt of lightning. It seeps in slowly, stripping away everything a person holds dear: honor, money, and the respect of society. The financial collapse happened faster than any scenario Mike could have imagined. The empty mansion he was desperately clinging to was now being foreclosed on by the bank. With no cash, no credit cards, even buying imported formula for the baby became a burden. Inside that house, thick with the smell of dampness and arguments, the great love Ashley had once professed was revealed for what it was: a cold, ruthless transaction. Ashley was no longer a sweet, cooing kitten. She had transformed into a terrifyingly pragmatic woman. She threw the fake DNA test she had used to trick Mike onto the table and shrieked, "You said you were a tycoon, that you would provide a life of luxury for me and my son," she yelled. "And now? The house is about to be repossessed, the cars, I will be taken. Are you planning to have your son live under a bridge? I don't care how you do it. Give me $5 million in cash, and I'll leave the sun with you and disappear. Otherwise, don't ever expect to see him again. Mike looked at the woman he had once risked everything for, his bloodshot eyes filled with desperation and fury. He realized Ashley had never loved him. She had only loved his wallet and the title of CEO's wife. Now that the ship was sinking, the first rat to jump overboard was her. You'd dare to leave me now? Mike hissed, his voice raspy. I don't have any money, you know that. Are you trying to kill me? That's your problem, Ashley replied coldly, packing her suitcase. I hear your ex-wife is very rich. She just started a $10 million charity. Can't you figure out a way to get it back? If she were to die, you're the ex-husband, the assets haven't been fully divided. You'd definitely inherit a portion. $5 million would be pocket change for you then. Ashley's casual words struck Mike like a bolt of lightning, awakening the demon that had been slumbering within him. That's right. Although we had signed the Taubel papers, the asset division was not yet finalized by the court. Legally, there were still loose ends. If I were to die suddenly at this moment, he could use the pretext of assets acquired during the marriage to contest, and perhaps even reclaim, the money I had moved. The dark thought took root and grew at the speed of a poisonous vine in the poisonous vine mind of a desperate man. He looked at the baby wailing from hunger, at his mistress demanding to leave, and at his own pathetic life. He blamed me for everything. He believed I was the cause of all his losses, and if I simply disappeared, all his problems would be solved. His cowardice had transformed him from a mere adulterer into a murderer in thought. That afternoon, the Chicago sky turned a gloomy gray, as if a storm was about to break. Mike drove a beat-up scooter he'd borrowed from a neighborhood security guard, his face hidden behind a mask, and headed to the city's outskirts, to a place of abandoned construction yards overgrown with weeds. He didn't use his own phone, but a cheap, untraceable burner phone he'd bought on a street corner. The meeting point was a derelict container yard in a rundown industrial area, where the rusted hulks of trucks lay like the skeletons of prehistoric beasts. The acrid smell of burnt oil mixed with the stench of garbage, making the atmosphere even more oppressive. Waiting for him in a shadowy corner was Rick, a truck driver who used to work for Mike's company, but was fired for petty theft and his drug addiction. The man was gaunt and haggard, his eyes glazed over, but glinting with greed when he saw Mike pull out a thick wad of cash. This is $50,000, a down payment. Mike's voice was cold, devoid of emotion. You know what to do. I want it to look like a normal traffic accident. Lost control, hit a cliff, or went over an embankment, I don't care how. Just make sure that bitch doesn't get a chance to open her mouth again. Rick grabbed the money, counting it with a flick of his thumb, a grimy smile revealing his yellowed teeth. Don't you worry, boss. This is my specialty. I've already cased her out. She's got a trip tomorrow to survey some land up near the Masons mountain passes in Colorado. That road's full of hairpin turns and thick fog. A truck losing its brakes is a common story. Just a little nudge is all it'll take. I guarantee it'll be clean and tidy. Mike nodded, a cruel light in his eyes. He handed Rick a photo of me and my license plate number, once again going over the details of my travel itinerary, which he had obtained by secretly installing a tracking app. He had no idea that, even in his most meticulous plans, the hand of fate was already closing in. The burner phone he was using was actually an old device he had found in the company's storage room. He thought a factory reset made it safe, but he had forgotten that every electronic device in the company had once been set up by me, with security and tracking features installed. And more importantly, their secret meeting in this desolate scrapyard was not known to just the two of them. Inside an empty shipping container just behind them, a pair of old but sharp eyes was watching, holding its breath, observing every gesture, every damning word. Mr. Peterson was the old security guard at this scrapyard, a quiet, weathered man who lived a solitary life in a dilapidated tin shack next to the heaps of scrap metal. Few knew that 3 years ago, when his wife fell gravely ill and needed urgent surgery, it was I who had quietly instructed the company's accounting department to use the employee welfare fund to help him, even after Mike had dismissed the idea as a waste of money. Mr. Peterson never had the chance to thank me properly in person, but he had etched the name Liz in his heart as the person who had saved his wife's life. That afternoon, he was resting inside an empty container to escape the 7-foot blistering sun when he heard the low rumble of a scooter and the sound of hushed, conspiratorial voices. He peeked through a rusty crack in the metal and immediately recognized the voice of his old boss, Mike, the man who had treated him so poorly. Every word of the plan, the accident, the brake failure, the Colorado Pass reached his ears as clearly as a thunderclap. He began to tremble, a cold sweat drenching his shirt. He knew if he made a sound right, then, the addict might kill him to silence him. He waited until the sounds of the scooter and the truck faded into the distance before he stumbled out of his hiding place. His calloused, grease-stained hands shook as he pulled an old flip phone from his pocket. He fumbled through a worn out notebook to find a phone number he had gotten from the HR department. Years ago, a number he had intended to call one day to offer his thanks but had never worked up the courage to use. I was in my office reviewing a new project proposal when an unknown number called. I answered. The voice on the other end was rushed, punctuated by ragged, fearful breaths. "Miss Liz? It's Peterson, the guard from the old yard. Ma'am, please, don't go to Colorado tomorrow. I just overheard. I heard Mr. Mike, he hired someone to hurt you. He said to make your car lose its brakes on the pass. Please, ma'am, don't go." My heart clenched, not with fear, but with a profound sense of gratitude. In a world of betrayal, where a husband would plot to kill his own wife, a total stranger, a poor working man, was risking his own safety to warn me. I took a deep breath to steady myself, my voice calm but firm. "Mr. Peterson, thank you so much. I understand. Please, stay calm and act as if you know nothing. For your own safety. I'll handle this. I promise, I'll be all right." After hanging up, I swiveled my chair to face the window. The sky outside had begun to rain, heavy drops splattering against the glass like the hoofbeats of an approaching reaper. But this time, death wasn't coming for me. It was coming for the one who had summoned it. I wasn't going to cancel the trip. On the contrary, I was going to turn this trip into the perfect trap, where the hunter would become the prey in his own cruel game. I picked up the phone and called the head of my private security team. "Get the armored vehicle and the drone team ready," I said. "Tomorrow, we have a big show to put on." The next morning, the Chicago sky was a heavy, oppressive gray, threatening a downpour. The air was thick and humid, heralding a day of turmoil. I stood before the mirror, adjusting the collar of my shirt, looking into my own tired but determined eyes. I was not canceling my trip to Colorado, as Mr. Peterson had advised. I knew Mike's nature. If his plan failed today, because I didn't show up, he would just find another way, something more brutal, more unexpected. Instead of living in constant fear, I chose to face this head-on, to end this nightmare once and for all. I went down to the garage, where Mr. Evans, my trusted driver and bodyguard from the security firm, was waiting next to an unfamiliar vehicle. It wasn't the sleek white sedan I usually drove, but a menacing black SUV, built like a sleeping beast. This was a specially reinforced vehicle with a steel-plated chassis and bulletproof glass, something I had quietly arranged for when I first noticed the disturbing changes in Mike's behavior. Mr. Evans nodded a greeting, his face serious. "Everything is ready, Miss Liz. The support team will follow in an unmarked car at a safe distance. The drone is fully charged and ready to record from above." I ran my hand over the cold metal of the vehicle, silently marveling at the irony of fate. The husband I had shared my life with whom I had exchanged vows of eternal love, was now the reason I needed an armored car and a security team to protect my own life. I got into the car. The smell of new leather and cool air created a sealed-off world, separate from the one outside. The vehicle pulled out of the garage, leaving the bustling city behind, heading towards the winding mountain roads where a hired killer was waiting for me. During the drive, I tried to keep my mind calm by flipping through some documents, but the words danced before my eyes. I remembered past road trips, how Mike used to drive so carefully, always reminding me to buckle my seatbelt, worried I'd get carsick. Now, he was the one who most wanted to see my car plunge off a cliff. The human heart can change in ways more terrifying than the deepest oceans. As our car entered the mountain pass in Colorado, a thick fog rolled in, blanketing the road and severely limiting visibility. Mr. Evans glanced at the possible rearview mirror, his voice low and steady. "Miss Liz, we're approaching the hairpin turn the subject chose. Please fasten your seatbelt tightly and keep your head down." I did as he said, my heart pounding in my chest. The sound of the engine, straining as it climbed, the wind whistling through the window sills it all, sounded like the howl of a wild animal. On the tablet screen, connected to the tel drone feed, I saw a red dot moving towards us from the opposite direction at an unusually high speed. It was the dump truck, the iron monster Mike had hired to crush me. In this moment of facing death, I felt no fear for myself, only a profound pity for Mike, the man who had just signed the death warrant for his own soul. The black SUV crawled into the deadly curve, a sheer rock face on one side, a deep, fog-shrouded abyss on the other. Just as we rounded the bend, a heavy-duty dump truck laden with gravel suddenly careened into our lane like a rabid beast. It showed no signs of slowing down. Its horn blared, a deafening sound that ripped through the mountain silence. Its headlights blinded me. The moment happened in a flash, but in my mind, it stretched for an eternity. Mr. Evans, with the reflexes of a trained professional, didn't slam on the brakes, knowing the inertia would be fatal. Instead, he gritted his teeth and expertly jerked the wheel, avoiding a head-on collision and allowing the side of our vehicle to take the impact. A horrifying crash echoed through the pass, the jolt so violent I felt my organs slam against my ribs. The sound of screeching metal filled the air, sparks flying. My SUV was thrown sideways, spinning several times before sliding to a stop perilously close to the edge of the cliff. Thanks to the heavily reinforced frame, the passenger cabin remained intact, not crumpled as the attacker had intended. The airbags deployed instantly, cushioning me from the impact. I was left dazed and shaken, but miraculously unharmed. I gasped for breath, touching my face. Still alive. I was still alive to see this final act play out. Meanwhile, the dump truck, after its ferocious attack, had lost all control. That driver, Rick, likely high on drugs or overwhelmed by adrenaline, could no longer command the iron beast. The truck slammed head-on into the rock face on the side of the road. Its front end was completely demolished, smoke pouring from the TARDIS hood. The gravel in its bed spilled onto the road, creating a scene of chaos and destruction. I shakily unbuckled my seatbelt and looked at Mr. Evans. He gave me a nod to signal he was okay. We sat still in the car, observing the situation outside through the tinted windows. The driver's side door of the mangled truck was kicked open, and Rick stumbled out, his face a mess of blood and grime. He showed no remorse or fear for having just caused a horrific accident. Instead, his eyes were filled with a wild, crazed fury. In his hand, he brandished a long tire iron. He limped towards my vehicle, muttering curses under his breath. He must have assumed anyone inside was either dead or severely injured. He was coming to do a final check, or more cruelly, to deliver a finishing blow if the victim was still breathing. But he didn't know that his every move, from the moment he rammed our car to him, brandishing his weapon, was being recorded by the eye in the sky, the drone hovering silently above. Rick approached my car and banged the tire iron hard against the window. The sharp clang was menacing. Seeing no movement inside, he smirked, convinced the job was done. He pulled out his phone and dialed a number, his trembling fingers stained with blood and grease, leaving smudges on the screen. From inside the car, I signaled for Mr. Evans to activate the long-range directional microphone. Rick's every word came through crystal clear. His voice was ragged. "Hey, Mike? It's done," Rick said. "The car's totaled, sitting right on the edge of the cliff. I'm about to check if the bitch is all the way dead. You'd better wire the rest of the money. I wrecked my truck for this." On the other end, Mike's voice came through the speaker, faint but unmistakable, laced with malice and glee. "Good work," he said. "Check carefully. If she's still breathing, help her along the rest of the way. I'll send the money as soon as you send me a picture for confirmation. Make it clean, no traces." That sentence was the final knife that severed any lingering thread of affection or pity I had for him. My husband, the man who had once promised to protect me for life, was now ordering my murder as casually as swatting a fly. I closed my closed eyes, swallowing the tears that threatened to fall, my heart colder than the mountain fog. It was enough. The evidence was more than enough to send him to prison. Just as Rick finished the call and raised the tire iron to smash the window and take his photo, the wail of police sirens echoed from a distance, shattering the mountain silence. Squad cars, coordinating with my security team, swarmed the pass from both directions, blocking the road. Flashing red and blue lights illuminated the driver's face, now contorted in terror. He tried to run, but it was too late. Officers quickly subdued him, pinning him to the hot asphalt. The cold steel of handcuffs snapped around his wrists, ending the career of a killer for hire. Only then did I open my car door and step out. The mountain wind billowed my car door coat. I stood there, looking at the struggling driver, my expression strangely calm. You're not dead, he stammered, staring at me as if he'd seen a ghost. I didn't answer him. I simply turned and handed a USB drive, containing all the audio and video evidence from the drone, to the lead police detective. This contains all the evidence of the attempted murder, including the phone call you just witnessed from the mastermind, I said, my voice soft but heavy. With authority. Please, arrest the right person for the right crime, so society can be rid of these beasts who walk in human skin. The driver hung his head. He knew he was finished. And more importantly, the puppet master, who had been pulling his strings, the man sitting comfortably in Chicago waiting for good news, was about to pay the price for his crime. The police sirens wailed again, but this time, they weren't a sound of fear. They were the sound of justice being served. Back in the empty mansion in Chicago, Mike was sitting on a cheap plastic chair, a half-empty bottle of wine in his hand, his eyes glued to his phone, waiting for the notification of his inheritance to come through. He was humming to Graftiol himself, calculating how he would legitimize his claim to my assets after my frame at death, how he would bring Ashley and their son home and rebuild his empire. The delusion of a prosperous future built on the corpse of his ex-wife made him forget his bleak reality. Ashley was in a corner, filing her nails. Seeing Mike smiling to himself, she sneered. "What are you smiling at like an idiot?" she asked. "Where's the money for the baby's formula?" "It's all gone. Just be patient," Mike smirked, his eyes gleaming. "The money's coming. A lot of money. That bitch Liz is about to disappear from this world. Then everything she has will be mine, will belong to our son." Ashley shivered. Though greedy, she had a vague sense that Mike had done something terrible. Before she could ask, a loud, insistent banging echoed from the front gate. A police officer's voice boomed through a megaphone, sharp and authoritative. "Mr. Michael Tran, open the door. We are the police, we have a warrant for your immediate arrest." Mike jumped, dropping the wine bottle. Red wine spilled across the floor like fresh blood. He scrambled to his feet, his face drained of color, his body shaking uncontrollably. He couldn't believe his ears. Why the police? How could they be here so fast? Rick had just called less than an hour ago. The door was breached, and officers swarmed into the house. Mike tried to run upstairs, but he was quickly restrained, his arms twisted behind his back. Ashley screamed, clutching the wailing baby and cowering in a corner. "What are you doing? I haven't done anything wrong," Mike yelled, struggling. "I'm a businessman. You can't just arrest me for no reason." The lead detective walked up, holding out the arrest warrant and a tablet that was replaying the audio of his call with Rick. Mike's own voice filled the empty room. "If she's still breathing, help her along the rest of the way." Hearing those words, Mike's spine seemed to dissolve. He collapsed to the floor, his eyes wide and vacant. "Mr. Michael Tran, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder and attempted grand larceny." The detective's voice was like a death sentence. "The evidence is overwhelming. You have the right to remain silent. But anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." The cold handcuffs clicked shut around Mike's wrists. The dry, final sound marked the end of a life consumed by blind ambition. He was led away, his head bowed, shuffling through the puddle of red wine on the floor, not daring to meet anyone's eyes. Ashley watched her lovers retreating back without a shred of pity. Only one thought occupied her mind. how to grab whatever cash was left in the house and escape before she, too, was implicated. The heavy steel door of the detention center clanged shut, sealing off a world of gloom and chilling silence. I sat in my lawyer's office, holding a warm cup of tea that did little to chase away the coldness in my heart. My lawyer had just returned from the visitation room. He placed a thin file on the table, his expression a mixture of sympathy and admiration. His task today was not to defend Mike, but to deliver a final gift from me, a truth so brutal it would shatter any last shred of hope in that man's mind. According to the lawyer, when Mike entered the interrogation room, he looked so wretched, he was almost unrecognizable. After just a few nights behind bars, the dapper CEO was gone, replaced by a man with a scraggly beard, sunken eyes, and the defeated air of a lost soul. He was still clinging to a last vestige of Tapperus pride, shouting that he had been framed, that I had set him up. But when my lawyer calmly pulled out the DNA test results, which had been express shipped from Australia, all of Mike's belligerence evaporated. I could picture the moment vividly. Mike's trembling hands taking the paper, his eyes scanning the dense English text before landing on the final, highlighted conclusion. No biological relationship. The paper was thin, but its weight was heavier than the prison sentence hanging over his head. The son and heir he had craved, the child for whom he had cast aside his wife and even stooped to murder to secure an inheritance for, was another man's child. The lawyer recounted Mike's words then, his voice was broken, twisted with disbelief. It can't be. It's fake. She lied to me. Liz lied to me. He crumpled the paper in his fist, then buried his head in his hands and sobbed like an abandoned child. Was it a cry of late-stage remorse, or the cry of a shattered ego? Perhaps even. He couldn't tell. He had traded everything, family, career, honor, and his own humanity for an elaborate deception from the mistress he thought was his one true love. I looked out the window. The rain was still falling steadily. I had known this truth for a long time, ever since Ashley was pregnant and I'd discovered her secret meetings with an old flame. But I chose to remain silent. My silence wasn't submission. It was a strategy to let Mike pull back the curtain on the truth himself. Only when his hopes were at their highest, his faith at its most blind, would the fall be the most painful, the lesson the most profound. That evening, Mike was released on bail, pending his trial, on grounds of his health and his cooperative confession. But I knew that for him, being released back into the world was not a mercy, but a punishment. He would have to face the world. Brutal reality, face the woman who had so thoroughly deceived him, and face his own monumental stupidity, all within the confines of that empty, hollow house. Mike returned to the mansion as dusk fell. The persistent rain had turned the precipice driveway into a slick, muddy path. With no car to pick him up, he had to walk from the main road, a limping, disheveled figure, who looked more like a beggar than a CEO. The front door was ajar. From inside came the sound of a baby's incessant crying and Ashley's shrill, angry voice. I sat in my new apartment, watching their family drama unfold on my monitor, via the still active security cameras, a strange bitterness for the human condition rising within me. Mike pushed the door open, his bloodshot eyes burning with a savage fury. Ashley was sitting on a plastic chair, scrolling through her phone. Seeing him, she offered no greeting, just a contemptuous sneer. I thought you'd have rotted in jail by now, she said. Why'd you come back to clutter up the place? Do you have any money? Or did you just come back to leech off me? Her words were like a lit match to a powder keg. Without a word, Mike lunged, snatched the phone from her hand, and smashed it on the floor. He pulled the scrabber, crumpled DNA test from his pocket, and threw it in her face. Money? You dare ask me for money? He screamed. Take a good look. Whose kid is that? You lied to me. You dared to make me raise another man's child all this time. Ashley froze, her face turning ashen. She picked up the paper, her hands shaking. The secret she thought was buried forever was now laid bare under the tauan dim light. But the instincts of a cornered animal took over. Instead of begging for forgiveness, Ashley's face hardened with defiance. Her voice was sharp and acidic. So what? You were stupid enough to fall for it. You think you're such a prize? You're ugly, and you're terrible in bed. If it weren't for your money, I wouldn't have even looked at you. I had to borrow a seed from someone else to give you the son you wanted. You should be grateful. You bitch. Mike roared like a wounded beast. He lunged at her, grabbing her hair and slapping her with a force that echoed through the room. Ashley fought back like a cornered cat, scratching, biting, and throwing whatever she could get her hands on. The sounds of their curses, of breaking objects, and the baby's terrified screams created a chaotic and tragic symphony. Just then, Carol came downstairs. Seeing her son and daughter-in-law locked in a death match, she panicked, dropped her cane, and rushed to intervene. Stop it, son, don't hit her, she cried, grabbing Mike's leg. She's the mother of our family's heir. It's a sin to do this. Heir to what? Mike screamed, shoving his mother away. He pointed at the baby. Open your eyes and look. That's another man's son. You brought this plague into our house. You've ruined my life. In the chaotic struggle, Ashley managed to break free. To escape, she shoved Carol hard. Old and frail, Carol lost her balance and fell backward, her head hitting the sharp edge of a stone step. A sickening thud echoed through the sectioning room. Carol let out a pained cry and then lay still, blood slowly seeping from the back of her head, staining the cold white tiles. The room fell into a deathly silence. Mike's hands dropped to his sides. He stared at his unconscious mother, then at Ashley, who stood panting, her hair a mess. Whose fault was this? Tragedy, really? Ashley's greed? Mike's weakness? Or Carol's blind ambition? The wail of an ambulance siren tore through the quiet night. Paramedics rushed in and carefully lifted Carol onto a stretcher. Mike, with a bleeding gash on his head from a vase Ashley had thrown, was helped to his feet. In the chaos of Tina Sevad, blood and tears, no one paid any attention to Ashley. She huddled in a dark corner, her eyes darting around like a rat, looking for an escape. She knew this family was finished, this gold mine was depleted and had caved in. If she stayed, she would not only be left with nothing but could also face legal trouble for assault. Taking advantage of the moment, Mike was getting into the ambulance with his mother, and before the local police arrived to secure the scene, Ashley slipped into Carol's bedroom. She knew the old woman, despite her complaints of poverty, had a small stash of savings hidden away. Carol had once drunkenly boasted that the combination to her small safe was Mike's birthday, and Ashley had committed it to memory. Her hands trembled as she entered the numbers. With a click, the safe door swung open. Inside wasn't as much cash as she'd hoped, just a few small gold bars, a savings passbook in Carol's name, and a stack of about $1,000 in small bills that the old woman had saved for her gambling circle. But for a desperate person like Ashley, it was a fortune for her escape. She cleaned out the safe, stuffing everything into her handbag. Then she grabbed a few pieces of the costume jewelry Carol had given her. Even knowing they were fake, she took them with the mentality that every little bit helped. Ashley ran back to her room, snatched the sleeping baby, threw a few clothes into a towel backpack, and slipped out the back door. Her figure melted into the pitch black night, leaving behind the shattered family she had helped destroy. Where she was going, she probably didn't know herself. But one thing was certain, karma would not let her get away so easily. The next morning, I received news from the hospital. Carol had survived this critical period, but due to the head trauma and the immense psychological shock, she was paralyzed on one side of her body and had temporarily lost the ability to speak. She lay in her hospital bed, her eyes wide, staring blankly at the Scott ceiling, tears streaming down her face. When a nurse handed her the police report detailing the theft of her assets, her mouth twisted, and she tried to moan Ashley's name, but only incomprehensible sounds came out. She had lost everything. Her life savings, the grandson she had so desperately wanted, and the fake affection of her precious daughter-in-law. I didn't visit. I only sent a bouquet of flowers and prepaid a portion of her medical bills. It wasn't forgiveness, it was the last ounce of human decency I could offer the woman I once called mother. Carol lay there, alone and disabled. Perhaps in the long nights to come, she would have plenty of time to reflect on the price of greed and cruelty. Just as the family storm began to subside, an economic tsunami hit, wiping out the last remnants of the Genesis Corp empire. On Monday morning, the city court officially declared Mike's company bankrupt. The morning business news was filled with the story. Images of the company logo being removed from the office building were broadcast on a loop, a final eulogy for the career of an entrepreneur once hailed as a young genius. The banks simultaneously triggered their early debt recovery clauses. The mansion in Lincoln Park, once Mike's pride and joy, the site of so much success and betrayal, was officially sealed. Yellow foreclosure tape stretched across the rusty iron gates like bloody scars. The remaining luxury cars, the undeveloped land projects, everything was seized to be auctioned off to repay his debts. Mike lay in a drab room in a public hospital. He could no longer afford a private one. His leg was in a cast, his head wrapped in white bandages. He held a newspaper, staring at the long list of his debts, unable to believe it was real. The total was in the tens of millions. The liquidated assets would barely make a dent. From a tycoon who spent money without a thought, he was now a notorious debtor, shunned by society. But more terrifying than poverty was the punishment of the law. The hospital room door opened. It wasn't a doctor or a nurse, but two investigators from the district attorney's office. They entered, solemn and cold, and placed an official arrest warrant on his bedside table. "Mr. Michael Tran, we are serving you with an indictment for the charges of conspiracy to commit murder and grand larceny," one of them said. "Once your health stabilizes, you will be transferred to a pretrial detention facility to await trial." Mike let the newspaper fall from his hands. He held out his trembling wrists for the handcuffs. This time, there was no shouting, no claims of innocence, no struggling. His eyes were empty, hollow like a dry well. He knew his life, as he knew it, was officially over. I stood outside the room, looking through the wafer small glass window in the door, and saw Mike bow his head, his shoulders shaking. I felt no satisfaction, only a sense of relief. Justice, at last, had been served. For everything he had done to me, to his family, and to others, he would now pay with the rest of his life behind bars. His downfall was not my doing, nor was it bad luck. It was the inevitable result of a long slide down a slippery slope of moral decay. The company's large conference room, where million-dollar deals were once signed, was now shrouded in a gloomy, funereal atmosphere. The potted plants in the corners were withered from neglect. A thin layer of dust coated the polished mahogany table. Today was the day the company's fate would be decided, or more accurately, the day the vultures would feast on the carcass. The creditors, bank representatives, and court officials sat grim-faced on either side of the table, ready to tear apart what little was left. Mike was brought in by police escort to sign the liquidation documents. He sat at the head of the table, no longer the powerful chairman. The ill-fitting, striped patient gown he wore looked pathetic. His cuffed hands rested on the table, the pen trembling in his grip. He kept his head down, not daring to look at the contemptuous and pitying gazes around him. Just as the atmosphere reached its most tense, the conference room doors swung open. The sharp, steady click of high heels on the marble floor echoed through the room. All eyes turned to the entrance. I walked in, wearing a chic and professional black dress, a thick file in my hand. Flanked by my lawyer and two assistants, I ignored everyone else, my gaze fixed on the chairman's seat at the head of the table, directly across from where Mike sat, shrunken and defeated. My lawyer spoke, his voice cutting through the stunned silence. "Ladies and gentlemen, my client, Miss Elizabeth Nguyen, representing the Sunflower Investment Group, has completed the acquisition of all of Genesis Corp's bad debts from the banks and private creditors. As of now, Miss Nguyen is the majority creditor and holds decisive power over the company's assets." A collective gasp went through the room. Mike's head snapped up, his eyes wide with disbelief, as if he were seeing a ghost. "Liz? Is that you? How could you?" he stammered. I offered a small, polite smile that was 1,000 miles away. "Hello, Mike. It's a small world, isn't it? I was the one who helped you build this company, brick by brick. But you dismissed me as a woman who only belonged in the represses kitchen. Today, I'm here to clean up the mess you left behind. Not to save you, but to save the livelihoods of the innocent employees standing over there." I signaled for my assistant to place the file in front of Mike. It was the official transfer of ownership and corporate restructuring agreement. I looked. Him straight in the eye, my voice cold. Sign it. It's the last thing you can do for this company before you go to prison. From this moment on, the name Genesis Corp will cease to exist. The company will be rebranded and will operate under my leadership. Mike's hand shook as he picked up the pen. A tear rolled down his cheek and splattered onto the white paper. He knew he had been completely and utterly defeated in money, in honor, and in character by the wife he had cast aside. He signed his name, the scrawl as jagged as a wound on the pride of a failed man. 2 months after his sentencing, I arranged a visit to the prison to see Mike. It wasn't because of any lingering affection, but because I wanted to close that chapter of my past, completely and on my own terms. The visitation room was divided by a thick, cold pane of glass. On my side was the world of freedom and future. On his, a world of confinement and repentance. Mike walked in wearing a standard prison uniform, his head shaved, revealing scars on his scalp. In just a few months, he had aged a decade. His back was stooped, his eyes sunken and dark. When he saw me, a flicker of desperate hope ignited in his eyes. He snatched the receiver, his voice trembling. "Liz, you came. I knew you still loved me. Please, help me. It's horrible in here, I can't take it." I looked at the man who was once my entire world, and I felt nothing. I picked up my own receiver, my voice even. "Mike, I'm not here to listen to you complain. I'm here to inform you that our divorce and asset division are finalized. The court has made its ruling. You are responsible for your own debts. The company is now legally mine. Why are you so cruel?" He choked out, tears streaming down his gaunt cheeks. "We were husband and wife. I was wrong, I know I was wrong. I was tricked by that witch. I was blinded by my desire for a son. Please, forgive me. Can you drop the charges? Bail me out? I promise, I'll start over. I'll be your slave too. Make it up to you." I shook my head slowly, a bitter smile on my lips. "Your mistake wasn't cheating on me, Mike. Your mistake was letting greed and selfishness destroy your humanity. You tried to have me killed to steal my assets. Have you forgotten? If I hadn't been lucky that day, you wouldn't be the one in prison. I would be 6 feet under. Would you have felt sorry for me then?" Mike was speechless. He bowed his head, his shoulders shaking. He couldn't answer, because he knew the cruel truth. I continued, each word a final nail in the coffin of his delusions. "You always wanted freedom. Freedom to be with your mistress, to live a life of luxury. Well, now you have it. No wife, no children, no stressful job to tie you down. You can just stay in here and enjoy the silence, and reflect on what it means to be a human being. I don't hate you, because hate is exhausting. I just pity you." I placed the receiver back on its cradle and stood up. Mike slammed his hands against the glass, his mouth opening in a desperate, silent scream. I could see him calling my name, but I couldn't hear a thing. I turned and walked away. The heavy steel door clanged shut behind me, a final, definitive sound. I stepped out of the prison gates and took a deep, cleansing breath of the free air. After leaving the prison, I drove to a nursing home tucked away in a quiet suburb. It was a modest state-run facility, a place for the elderly poor with no 71 to care for them. The strong smell of antiseptic mixed with the musty odor of old plaster walls. I walked down a long, dim hallway and stopped at room 304. Inside the cramped room were 4 simple metal beds. Carol lay on the one in the far corner, facing the window. She was paralyzed on one side, her mouth twisted, drool staining her pillow. No one would recognize the proud CEO's mother who once flaunted her fake Birkin and gold chains. Now, she was just a disabled, abandoned old woman. I stood in the doorway, watching her. She seemed to sense my presence and, slowly, painfully turned her head. When she saw me, her clouded eyes widened with shock, and a desperate, pleading look filled them. She tried to make a sound, her one good hand flailing in the air as if trying to reach for me. I didn't go in. Memories flooded back. The bowls of expensive soup I used to stay up late to prepare for her, which she would taste and spit out, complaining they were bland. The silk dresses I bought her, which she called old-fashioned and gave to the housekeeper. The way she had sided with my husband's mistress to kick me out of my own home. "Do you remember that fake jade bracelet you gave Ashley? I asked softly, knowing she might not understand. You spent your whole life chasing after fake, superficial things. In the end, all you got back was falsehood. Your son is in prison, your precious grandson is another man's child, and all your money is gone. This is the price you pay. Tears welled up in Carol's eyes and streamed down her wrinkled cheeks. She let out a series of choked, heartbreaking sobs of regret. I sighed and turned to a passing nurse, handing her an envelope. This is to cover her expenses for the next 3 years, I said. Please hire someone to keep her clean. Don't tell her it's from me. Let her think it's from Social Security. The nurse nodded. I turned and walked away, not looking back. I was no saint, ready to welcome her back after all the pain she had caused. But I couldn't be so heartless as to let her starve in squalor. Letting her live out her days in lonely, silent regret was, perhaps, the most fitting sentence of all. 3 years later. Chicago at night, viewed from the 45th floor of a glittering financial tower, was a dazzling galaxy of light. I stood on the balcony of the dazzling CEO's office, a glass of red wine in hand, letting the night breeze play with my short, stylish hair. Down below, the ceaseless flow of traffic was like the lifeblood of the city. I took a deep breath, savoring the taste of success and the calm of freedom. I hadn't sold the company or dedicated my life to charity, as heroines in novels often do. I am a businesswoman, and I find joy in my work, in contracts and strategies. Under my leadership, Mike's old company had been Anna PT. Reborn as a leading agricultural import-export corporation, providing jobs for thousands. The Sunflower Legal Foundation was thriving, a beacon of hope for countless women. My phone buzzed softly on the table. It was a text from David, my strategic partner on a new project, a calm, insightful man who always treated me as an ass equal. The message was simple. Done with meetings, boss lady? Found an amazing hole-in-the-wall ramen place tonight. The real deal. Care to join? I smiled, a genuine smile that came from the heart. No syrupy words, no roses or candles. Just an invitation to eat ramen, yet it warmed me in a way I hadn't felt in years. We had made no grand promises. We were letting things unfold naturally. After the storm, I understood that love wasn't about possession or dependence, but about the harmony of two independent souls. I put down my wine glass and texted back a simple okay. I slipped on my blazer, turned off the lights, and stepped into the elevator. To reflection showed a woman with faint laugh lines around her eyes, a woman who had seen hardship but now radiated a fierce, vibrant beauty. The painful past was closed. The wicked had paid their price. And I was walking my own path, not to a fairy tale ending, but to the beginning of a brilliant reality that I had built with my own 2 hands. The elevator doors opened, and I stepped out into the flow of the city, ready for whatever came next.